While I can't say that we've had a lot of movement on that so far, we are establishing a good baseline of processes and procedures that we hope to use moving forward in terms of hiring those staff. So that is so far, it hasn't been a productive process in terms of on paper, but in terms of what we're doing behind the scenes, it has really been beneficial getting the groups together. One of the things we have been looking into for some time is establishing some type of pathway between either local businesses or establishing some internships where we can start to get some people in the pipeline, get them some exposure to Wake County Public Schools and the work that is done in maintenance and operations, and kind of show them how great of a place this is to work. And so that's something that we've been working on. As far as transportation, we are at 621 drivers. The last
Lois
time
gave me a heart attack because you were at over
sorry.
600 last time.
Right. The last time we were at 621 drivers was in, I believe, July of 2022.
Good.
So lots of efforts in that regard. Our recruiting efforts, again, another group that meets every 2 weeks in terms of identifying potential candidates, following up with responses. As I think I've shared with you all before, we have an individual dedicated to following up with applicants who express some interest in driving a bus for us. So that has been real positive as well. We continue to recruit heavily. Our target goal for the opening of the new schools in the fall would require us to have a minimum of 630 drivers to maintain the service levels that we have right now. So we're moving in the right direction and headed forward that. I do want to mention, I think some of you may have called it at the last board meeting, but in CNS we have hired a new senior director for child nutrition. We're really excited about that. Tiffany Lawrence will be starting with us on February 24th. I speak with her, not daily, but every few days. We're already having some great discussions, and the staff at CNS are in the process of preparing things for Tiffany. So when she shows up on the 24th, we'll be ready to go. And then lastly, I wanted to mention, so there are a couple of faces in the back of the room over there. We thought it would be beneficial to them and maybe to you all as well, but mostly to them, so that you could see some of the staff that does some of the work. Nick Surser back there and Hakeem Purnell are two of our new project managers. They started with us first of the year, I think. Yeah. And so they are new to the district. We're excited to have them. Hakeem found out last week that sometimes we play music on Friday afternoons, and he can contribute to the playlist if he so chooses. So we just wanted to have them come and, sit in and see what a facilities committee is about. And I think, in fairness to some of the other employees which have been here a little while, we may bring them to some of the meetings moving forward, just so they can see the fruits of their labor and the things that we discuss in the facilities committee meeting.
I appreciate that.
Be glad to answer any questions, but that's the quick update.
Any questions? We got new business later. I'll have some stuff, but all right, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to approve January 15th minutes?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, Ms. Parker.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Ms. Gordon, to your first Facilities Committee meeting.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you. I have with me today Margaret Sutter, who is our Director in Real Estate Services. Margaret has been with us about 17 years and does all the things necessary for me to come here and not have to worry about what's happening at the office. We're pleased to bring to you naming opportunities for 2 land bank sites that we've acquired. We thought we'd first begin with the Wendell Elementary School land bank site. It's known as E57. The board acquired a site on Highway 97 in Wendell at the intersection of Marshburn Road, Lizard Lick Road, and 97 Highway. It's a 35.5-acre site for a future elementary school site, so we'd like to name that. In accordance to board policy, we brought forward 4 names for your consideration: Marshburn Road Elementary, Lizard Lick Elementary, Fall Branch Elementary, and North Wendell Elementary. Marshburn Road Elementary is proposed as it identifies the road from which the school will likely be accessed. It will help specifically identify the location of the site. Lizard Lick Elementary is proposed as it identifies the community within which the site is located and will also help to identify the location. Falls Branch is proposed as it references the nearest geographic feature. Falls Branch is located south of the site, and it's the stream into which the runoff from this site will drain. And of course, that flows into the Little River. North Wendell Elementary is proposed as it identifies the area of Wendell within which the school site is located and will help to identify the location of the site. We've collaborated with Town of Wendell staff to let them know about these. We did not receive either opposition or support for any of them, but they are aware. We've recommended the selection of Lizard Lick. With that, I'd like to give you a little bit more information. First of all, if you haven't had a chance to read our naming policy, it's fairly straightforward. It usually looks at the community it's in, the address it's on, and the nearest geologic features. So we don't typically name schools after people. Our process is to bring it first to you and to get your recommendation. Staff's recommendation is intended to be a conversation starter. Whatever the board chooses to name it is fine. And from this meeting, our intention is to take forward your recommendation to the next board meeting for a formal approval. So a little bit more about each one. In recent years, the board has been very sensitive to any school names we have where there's a link back to enslaved peoples. So we've done some research on that and some history on each of these, and want to just give you a quick snapshot of what we found. Marshburn Road was most likely named for the Marshburn family. Their history in Wendell dates back to 1797. Daniel Marshburn moved from Oslo County after fighting in the Revolutionary War, and they've been a fairly prominent family throughout the generations in agriculture, law enforcement, church establishment, education, and medicine. We couldn't find any information that indicated ownership or enslaved peoples associated with the Marshburn name. But again, it's Marshburn Road. It's been there a long time, so directionally it could be supported. Lizard Lick is a community that's been in place since the 1700s. In fact, in the late 1800s, there was a Lizard Lick school there. So there's an opportunity to recreate an educational spot there. It's a small community. It got as high as 1,300 residents at one point, and it's one of those names people like to use from time to time. So we've offered that. It is located at the heart of the Lizard Lick community. It's at the intersection of Lizard Lick Road, Marshburn, and Highway 97. Falls Branch is fairly self-explanatory. It's the name of the stream. And North Wendell Elementary there are 2 aspects I would bring to your attention. North is North today, just like West Cary is not in West Cary. It's more in Central Cary as the towns grow. And Wendell was named for Oliver Wendell Holmes. So there is some connection there. Again, I'm not aware of any relationship to enslaved peoples. He's a poet and a Chief Justice. So that's the Nicholsworth background. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions and would appreciate your guidance on what your preference is.
So quick question, are these are on the CIP or are, like how far in advance do we normally name?
These are both on the CIP. These have both been identified for funding in the current 7-year CIP.
Perfect. Opinions, thoughts? I have my own, but Ms. Caulfield?
I was just curious because I know that, like, especially living in the heritage area with the heritage schools, I had heard that we kind of steered away from naming the schools after the communities themselves. So that's more of a concern for student assignment, that people might feel like if they move to a certain area that should be their school because they live there.
Specifically, if I may, that's been something when we talk about municipalities or units of government, because sometimes it's caused confusion, where someone might think, well, if this is the Wendell Elementary, that maybe the town of Wendell is paying for it with their taxes, and if I have a grievance, I should go to the town council, right? But that's really been more based on municipalities, and units of government as opposed to locations. So we have named schools after the location where the school is set, but even then, sometimes it does create an expectation that if you named it after like a larger community and then you had to reassign out, that some people might think by living in that community, that was their school, right? And they had some right to be there. But there's a subtle distinction, but yeah, that's what we were talking about.
If I might offer a clarification.
Please.
I think you're both correct on what our histories have been. I think we viewed heritage as a large plan unit development and not a community in the sense of the word that I'm using this as an established community of people. Heritage had not previously been a community. It was really with that large development. So it's folks who are outside that development wanting to be in. But you're absolutely right. That hasn't been an issue. But I think the way that's been articulated in the past may have been slightly different. But good points.
What was it about Lizard Lick? I think you said staff. That was kind of staff's recommendation. Maybe I misinterpreted it.
Yes, staff recommends Lizard Lick.
So what was it about it that?
I'll never get another chance to say Lizard Lick in front of the board.
That's-
And we have to start
It has been
somewhere.
growing on me since it first came up.
Yes.
I know Ms. Mahaffey co-signs on Lizard Lick, but
Now, one of the town staff members, it was the first suggestion out of their mouth, and it is in the Lizard Lick community. But it's whatever the board's pleasure is.
they could do the Lizard Lick like elephants or something. Totally unrelated.
I would suggest the leaping lizards.
That's pretty great. Any thoughts, names, please, from Ms. Rice?
I have a question. Did you, just curious of staff's thoughts around, what was the preference over, since it's like, I know we just talked about that it's in Zebulon, what was the preference over making it East Zebulon versus your choice of Old Bun Road just because of the street that it's on? Is Old Bun Road kind of like a new street?
I'll be glad to address that one. That's in the next item.
Oh, my fault. I'm sorry. I thought I was on the same
We
one.
started with 57 because frankly, that conversation is going to be a lot more difficult to have.
Okay.
And we started with the easy one. We thought we'd get some
Okay,
momentum.
then I'm away. Oh, hold on. I
But it will be a great question.
It's the
So what-
same question for
What do
the
you need
window.
from us as a committee for the board meeting?
Typically, the Facilities Committee will consider and discuss the options and choose its recommendation. We then bring that forward to the full board for recommendation. We've done it both in action and consent, however the board chooses. But currently, we've submitted précis for that meeting with a blank, and we're ready to fill in your choice.
So if we can't come to an agreement, we will have the discussion at the board table. Does anyone have any? I like Lizard Lake, and I'm there. I went there, but I'm open to, that's just one, so that's.
And that, it sounds really great. It sounds very comical. But again, it's the same question that I'm going to propose for the other one. Why not North Wendell versus the Lizard Lake piece? What was I just want to hear staff thoughts so that then I can better make a decision. I just say not Lizard Lake because that's a whole TV show, a whole other negative connotations with it. It's not necessarily something that I would love associated with our school in that small town that happens to also be a national television show. It just doesn't look good for us as a district. But
So the questions that I considered was, if we're geologically or geographically telling you where it is, it's in the northern part of Wendell. Lizard Lick is almost exactly equidistant from Wendell or Zebulon, but Wendell is growing in that direction, and it will be annexed into Wendell. The question with North Wendell is we don't have South Wendell, East Wendell, or West Wendell. We have Wendell. So you have North Wendell and Wendell. So some towns like to see their name and everything, some don't. In past years, boards have shied away from putting it on the name of a town and shied more, and leaned more toward roads. I'm not a strong advocate for any one of these, whatever you want. If I don't offer something as a recommendation, no one knows where to start.
And let's say we come up with one, and a year from now or 2 years from now, the community says, we really want this change. I mean, it's just not set in stone because it's not.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. We've had that once before where we named the high school at Apex and it became Apex Friendship.
Right.
There was some pushback and desire as things evolved. But the community was here, obviously long before the reality show, and little known fact, when the Nintendo 64 came out with Yoshi in it, this was their launching spot, and that's known as Lizard Lick. So that's most recent in mind. I certainly understand that.
Ms. Rice, did you have a suggestion on which one?
I know I'm supposed to come with solutions when I come up with a problem, but we have some other solutions to
Yeah.
choose from. If I have to look, I did look at this, but you clarified with me about the north-south, so that makes sense to close it out. But even Fall Branch, I don't know. But if Lizard Lick is okay, I will not disagree with the total of the board, but I just Lizard Lick in that show is I
I
can
know
get
it's the
my
very
mind.
first thing I said.
No.
Ms. Gordon, what do you think?
I'm between Marshburn and Fall Branch.
Okay. Sure, Harry.
So I'm biased because the folks on the TV show were classmates of mine at the WCPSS school. And so I have fond memories of them before the reality show. But having said that, remember, this is just a recommendation.
Yeah.
So no matter what we decide now, it will come to the board. And I think this is a good opportunity to have the discussion, to propose the names, and then get that community feedback. Just like we had with the Morrisville schools that were opened. We had recommendations from staff, we talked about them, and then we heard from people in the community. So I'll go with my bias toward Lizard Lick just to start the discussion, but I certainly understand where you're coming from, because we do want it to be taken seriously, and we don't want it to be a joke, right? And there's a certain amount of, respect and, dignity you want the school to have.
Right.
But if we have the conversation, then we can hear back from residents, from potential staff, and see what people
And
think.
while this is on the CIP, do we have 5-7 years out kind of thing?
Well, I would say, even though from when we have to buy
It
a
could
sign for the
actually be like
school,
10 years out.
it can complicate things, Ms. Parker, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to be entering into like a lot of legal agreements that name the school, and if we have to then go back and change the name, that would require like amending contracts and purchase orders and things.
It could. It could. That's one of the advantages of having a name early, so that it's set to the contract start that way.
Got it. Dr. Ng?
I have a compromise of sorts. I like Marshburn, but how about the Marshburn Leaping Lizards?
No. Oh, sorry.
No, I mean for the
Sorry.
for the
mascot.
For the mascot.
Sorry, Ian. I'm sorry. My
For the mascot.
apologies. I'm sorry.
The mascot being the lizards.
I was just saying it was a long name. I'm sorry, but I hear you.
Yeah, the mascot. being
That's
the lizards.
good.
December.
That's amazing.
I don't want to call any, I would say present the 3 to the public and get that community feedback, because I don't think it's appropriate to do otherwise. I think we're getting ahead of them, and that's not the right way to do it. So, because it is, I'm born and raised in Durham, my whole life, and I knew of Lizard Lick, outside my community, and even before there was reality show, I mean, there were often some giggles when somebody would talk about Lizard Lick, or,
Yeah, sure.
and whether or not that was justified. I'm just telling you that was long before they really deserve to have a say here.
You got it.
Ms. Parker, if I could, in terms of contractual obligations and wanting to have something set in stone, kind of what do you think would be the recommended time frame that we're talking about to at least try to get this resolved? Because we do want to have an opportunity to get some feedback from the community, but in terms of that time frame, what do you think would be appropriate?
Well, typically, we would bring it to the board, skip a meeting and bring it back, and usually the publication of what the board considered in its choice is enough to bring comment to you. This time, we were planning on trying to bring it back at the 18th. This was initially planned for January and didn't get on the agenda. And frankly, I was trying to wrap things up so Ms. Sutter doesn't get to come back. But it can take as long as you want it to. If it's not going to be covered on the 18th, we'll need to pull that from the agenda. and then push it back 1 or 2 meetings, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Ms. Caulfield, did you have a thought?
Lizard Lick sounds like a fun name. I did not know about it, but apparently I think some people might be tuning in to see what Lizard Lick TV show is about now. But I liked Lizard Lick and Mashburn, but I do like the idea of letting the public decide. So instead of having 4, could we narrow it to 2 and then just ask the community what they like and then go with that?
Thoughts on that?
And I could agree with that, because while I do be the first one to value community input, as a board, we still have to narrow things down, and we can take a very long time to do something that could be a very short process. So I just want us to be mindful of those barriers as well, but yet still give community input. Even though staff has given us 3 or 4 different names, I think that even if we compromise and bring it down a little bit, because sometimes too many choices is just too overwhelming. And I would even agree that Lizard Lick should be one of the choices of the 2 if we decide.
Well, so far, what correct me if I'm wrong, but Marshburn and Lizard Lick, we can put out to a vote and, to the community, and there can be a third option that says, please, neither of those. So if there's
Well, I was advocating for leaving the third one on there, not the North Wendell, the other one.
Leave Falls Branch.
Thank you.
Because I like Falls Branch too.
Okay, that would be fine.
So that's 3.
So I think 3 is fair. 3 is enough choice.
For clarity, there's not a mechanism that we've used in the past for bringing this to the public beyond the reporting of the outcome of this meeting.
That's right.
If you, for the next crises, what we could do is, instead of saying, these were the options and the committee recommended this, we could say, the options recommended for further consideration by the full board were 1, 2, 3, and with anticipated input from the public. We can change that crises about so that it's decided at the table and move it to action. With that, I would want to know if you want to keep it on the 18th or go ahead and move it into March.
Thoughts on that? This way.
Could we keep it on the 18th so that they get to keep with their agenda? And is it possible at all if our chief communications could put it, I guess, on the web really quick and let principals or whatever area, if we're doing it as county-wide or we're just doing it that district-wide location? And so that's the other thought there. And then let the principals send it out in their text message or whatever the methods in which we use to give them a date and time to give us a calculation.
So I would think student assignment, identifying kind of that area, and maybe Wake County Public School families that are already there at a minimum.
We'll have to.
But we can talk,
work it
staff can discuss and come up with it.
Yeah, I just think it's, something we can just put out really quickly and let principals do their burst so that we can get some level of feedback.
Those names will have meaning to the community.
Right.
So that those people in that community have probably the most say in what that name should be.
I would agree.
Yes. That's my thought.
So some way to target the community.
Now, the 18th, to keep
Yeah.
the timeline.
Okay, moving on.
They were not easy names. Like that was kind of tough. So, good job.
That was the easy one?
That was the easy one. That was the easy one. The next site that we're focused on is our E54 site. It's a land bank site that's located on Old Bun Road in Zebulon. It's about 43 acres. It's located on the southern side of Old Bun Road between 39 Highway and 97 Highway East. In accordance with the policy, we've offered the following names: Old Bun Road Elementary, Little Creek Elementary, and East Zebulon Elementary. Old Bun Road is proposed as it specifically identifies the road from which the site will be accessed, and it identifies its location. Little Creek Elementary is proposed as it references the nearest geographic feature that's located south of the site, and that drains into Moccasin Creek. East Zebulon Elementary is proposed as it identifies the area of Zebulon within which the school site is located and will help identify the location. We have chatted with Town of Zebulon staff and recommend Old Bun, but I may change that recommendation after the information that I've gleaned. I will say in this situation where this is Zebulon can't get much easter than this. So the West Cary dilemma is not something you'd likely have there. Once again, we have a Zebulon Elementary, but east is the only one with a directional attached to it. The other piece, Zebulon, the town, is named for Zebulon Vance, who was a two-time North Carolina governor, senator, congressman, and Confederate soldier and slave owner. So that's the town, but naming it East Zebulon would be a reference to the town. That gets a little personal, and others may have different opinions. So it was intended to be a reference to the town. Little Creek Elementary is simple. Little Creek is a little creek. It is a stream that flows into Moccasin, and since Moccasin's a bit further away, we felt like the appropriate designation was Little Creek. From the start, Old Bun has been the obvious one because that's the road name. We did some research on this. Old Bun was named for a gentleman, Green Walker Bun, who owned the property where the town of Bun is located. It was located there, and then when the town named itself, it was named after him. He was a very large landowner and sort of a settler in the region. When the railroad came through, it had to be in a higher location than where Bun was located. So it was up the hill, basically, from the Bun area. And they renamed that Bun and literally moved the town because the development arose around the railroad. So the original location of Bun was referred to as Old Bun. So the information I'm showing refers to that. Now, I have not found information that Mr. Bun owned slaves. But here's the confusing piece. Just to the west of this and north is the site of the old Bennett Bun, no relationship, Bennett Bun plantation, and they were most certainly holders of enslaved peoples. So I'm not sure if you can tell one Bun from another when it's on the name of a school, but its proximity to an historic site that's been recognized for the Bennett Bun plantation could at a minimum be confusing. And with that, that's no longer what we would recommend, but we did not want to withdraw the proceeds once it was in. So I think for this one, the choices are a bit more limited. To start discussions, I would suggest Little Creek Elementary.
I was going to say, you made it
we
pretty
agree.
easy for me. I really love the name Little Creek. Yes, Ms. Edmonds?
That was my recommendation, Little Creek.
And there is a Bun Elementary School just across the county line as well. That could
Yeah.
cause some
Yeah.
confusion.
That's what I was thinking too.
I think it's confusing to have Zebulon and East Zebulon, so I really like the tone of Little Creek. It just
Sweet.
sounds cute.
Yeah, it's a great name for an elementary school.
And they can be the moccasins.
The moccasins. Yep.
So,
Perfect. We got one done. That was an easy one.
That was easy.
Well, it's easy.
So,
Once you do a lot of research and frame it simply and delicately, then it's easy.
So I think for this one, we don't need to, I think everyone's good.
we have a recommendation.
Recommendation to say
Little
for the
Creek
other.
Elementary is the recommendation. We're good.
All right. Would the board be comfortable with our adding that to consent as opposed to an action item, since there seems to be clarity and we have a majority of the board
Is the
here?
other site going to be an action item then?
It's going to need to be.
I would actually keep them together then, just
Yes, sir?
let's announce it all together because you're going to be there anyways. And this will be really quick, and then just in case anyone not here has any thoughts.
Right.
But yeah,
When we present it in front of the board, typically the praeses will simply say, these were considered, this was the recommendation, we're asking the board to
That's
consider this.
fantastic.
So we typically would not go into the same discussion that you received today
Okay.
unless questions come from the board at that time.
sounds great.
All right?
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Appreciate it very much. Well, so next on the agenda, we have a presentation from Toward Zero Waste, and I'm going to let them get into it. And this is, staff is here, so staff has asked me questions about this, so staff, please be ready to ask questions. looking at Margaret Strickland specifically. But this is I'm very excited about this. And I'm just going to add some commentary and say, it's also very sad that we have to have these types of things, and that I wish that we could work with the federal government maybe a little better as far as how we are reimbursed for food, what food is required to be taken, this and that. But based on what we're working with, the ability to have share tables, collect unused food, I know it's been a sore spot for a lot of parents of how much, and for teachers and principals, how much food we're just throwing away. And so the ability to capture some of that and to provide it for students or for staff if they need it is fantastic. And so, hang on, I got to pull up the agenda. So if you want to start, you want to introduce everybody and take it away, and the floor is yours.
I'm Kathleen Leibowitz. I'm the Executive Director of Towards Zero Waste. This is Megan Haller, and she is our Cary Community Director as well as our Food Recovery and Compost Specialist. And this is Alyssa Carmen, and she is our Mayor of Corvus and has worked with Megan on the project. Just wanted to give you a little information on Towards Zero Waste. We're an organization that was started by 2 Wake County residents in 2016 who are very concerned about waste, what was going on in our area. And they started just with education out there, talking to everybody, and we officially became a nonprofit in 2019, fall of 2019. And we can probably go to the next screen. And so as a registered nonprofit in 2019, and our best successes involve collaboration with local municipalities, businesses, and other nonprofits. We collaborated with the town of Cary on their food waste recycling drop-offs. Anybody live in Cary who's used it? Yay, thank you. And we facilitated a public-private partnership between Wake County and Kane Realty to provide Midtown Farmers Market's compost drop-offs. We also have our makers group, which they use reusable. They use donated material to make reusable handmade bags, and we donate those to the downtown Cary Farmers Market. We made 500 of them last year because we'd really like people not to use plastic bags. So we have a lot of programs going on. Those are just 3 that we decided to put on the screen, but I'm going to let it over to Megan to describe all the work she's done.
Next slide, please. So thank you so much for having us here today. We're really excited to talk about this with you. And as you probably heard, we are not a traditional food recovery organization at Towards Zero Waste. But I have a feeling you probably would agree that food recovery does align very well with organics management and general waste reduction, which we are extremely involved with. And so in 2023, when the waste composition study came out from Wake County for the school district, and we saw that nearly half of elementary school waste was compostable. Of course, initially at Towards Zero Waste, we clung on to that data point to further promote and advocate for composting initiatives in public schools. And we certainly are very excited to say that over 10 Wake County schools today have composting programs of some degree. But around that time, we actually started hearing from community members and parents asking us about food recovery and options for that. And when we went back to that same study, we saw that the contractors had noted that there was an abundant number of unopened, prepackaged fruits, vegetables, and other foods. So we decided that this was worth a deeper look. So in 21-22, as you guys most likely know, 33% of our students in Wake County Public Schools received free and reduced meals. Also that same year, 14% of our children in the county under 18 were food insecure. In 2024, lunch waste audits at Wiley Elementary and Olds Elementary found that 20 to 35% of the waste from lunch was recoverable food. And that was second only to compostable food scraps and ahead of trash. And of course, this school year, we have 199 Wake County schools, more coming on board, which could mean thousands of pounds of saved and redistributed food each month. And what we certainly took away from these key data highlights is that a food recovery program in our district could have a significant impact, not only on food waste reduction, but also on food insecurity. So what is the path forward? We at Toward Zero Waste are liking to propose a program called SHARE, Stop Hunger and Restore Earth, a food recovery program designed to capture wholesome leftovers from child nutrition services and feed our students rather than landfills. So over the last year, next slide, sorry. So with funding from the Lonnie and Carol Poole Family Foundation, as well as other donors, we have been working very hard for over a year now, actually. We have researched across the country what other school districts are doing in terms of food recovery. We've looked into the history in North Carolina regarding food recovery. We have had numerous conversations with a wide range of community stakeholders, both at the local level, at the state level, as well as at the national level, to really work on crafting a program, designing a program that would work for Wake County, that would be effective and would ultimately be scalable. So what we are proposing today is piloting a food recovery program for our district, beginning with 8 elementary schools. And of course, the goal would be to expand in the future. When we started designing the program, we knew that we wanted the program to have these 4 overarching goals. So reducing the amount of wholesome, prepackaged, unopened food that's going to our landfills from our cafeterias. Establishing a food recovery program to distribute those food items first to students. And what we wanted to really make sure was that this program is available to any student in the school. So that helps to reduce and ideally eliminate the stigma that is sometimes associated with our programs like Backpack Buddies or our food pantries or food banks. We also want to make sure we're increasing student engagement by increasing awareness of hunger and respect for the environment. We don't want it to be an everyday commonplace that we throw away unopened edible food. We want to be respectful of the resources and guidelines from Wake County, from CNS, by feeding, again, our students rather than landfills. Next slide. So here's a few of the images from some of our research that we have done across the country, looking at other school districts that have implemented very exciting programs. They had been in place for a variety of periods of time. You can see we looked at Massachusetts, we looked at California, we looked at Virginia, and we have melded some of the key features of these various programs into what we have designed for Wake County. So the physical setup for our program, this is what we are proposing for Wake County. It would contain 3 key materials for the program. A share collection cart that would be stationed in the cafeteria during meals, so during breakfast, during lunch. Students would then be able to donate approved items. They would be able to take approved items for eating during the meals. Then a share refrigerator and pantry cart that would be located in a central area like the front office or a guidance counselor suite, somewhere that's accessible and visible to staff and students. And that would allow them to take food throughout the week from the fridge and pantry. And examples of that would be, students coming in late from carpool, or their bus was late and they missed breakfast line. They could go to the fridge or pantry. Students that their classes have run out of the parent-provided snacks, the teachers could suggest they go and get something from the pantry or fridge. Students coming to the office and not feeling well, and then you drill down and you find out it's because they didn't have enough for breakfast or lunch. They can offer a healthy snack. Students at dismissal, students attending school activities. So there are a number of ways that this food could be accessed. So a familiar theme as we were talking to school districts across the country, and certainly we wanted to honor this theme because we know it's a theme in our district as well, is that time is limited. Our school staff are overworked already, and we certainly wanted to be cognizant of that and design a program that took that into account. And so we worked really diligently to streamline and make this as efficient as possible with as few hands as possible. And so what we have designed are 4 key roles. The SHARE program administrator, and otherwise known as the primary contact for us, is the administrator or the staff member that has the delegated authority to implement the program and who is overseeing and helping to make sure their school has the other roles fulfilled. The share cart supervisor is one or more staff members or people that supervise that share collection cart during the meal periods. So just keeping an eye on the cart, knowing what items are approved and what can go on the cart and what cannot. The share stalker is, again, one or more people that would take that collection cart with the remaining items at the end of breakfast, at the end of lunch, and take it to the fridge and pantry and offload the remaining items. That's another chance to check to make sure the items are the ones approved by the program. And then the final role would be the share cleaner. So this is someone at the end of the instructional week that would check the items for freshness, check the dates. We have guidelines and parameters around all of these items, and clean the fridge and the rolling cart as needed.
And for right up front, CNS staff is...
Thank you. I meant to add in this slide. Thank you, Sam. I wanted to make sure we were very clear that we were very intentional in the fact that there is no formal role for CNS staff in this program. The food has already come through their line. They have done their important job. They have sold it to the students. They have given it to the students. This is food that is donated and then managed by school staff or parents, or, as we've talked about, for the roles involved. So, what items can be recovered in North Carolina? So you may remember some of the images we saw from other school districts. You saw milk, you saw cheese. In North Carolina, we are not able to recover time and temperature controlled for safety foods. That is a North Carolina interpretation of health and food safety codes. So we are able to recover non-TCS foods. We have divided these foods up into 4 categories for ease of reference and ease of awareness from students and staff. Packaged snacks are the first. These are things like graham crackers, our breakfast muffins that are individually wrapped, our cereals in the morning, chips on nachos days. I see a lot of Tostitos chips going into the garbage at my school. Condiments and utensils, packaged forks and spoons, ketchup, syrup, ranch, hot sauce. Kids will often take quite a few and then not use them. We took a tip from San Mateo to actually attempt to recover those and see if we can redistribute them or then donate them at the end of the week. Fresh fruit. So we can recover foods for the program that have non-edible peels. So that would be bananas and oranges. However, at elementary school level, we will primarily be targeting bananas because the oranges are scored at the top. Best practice for allowing the smaller children to be able to open the oranges. At middle and high school, that changes. So down the road, we would be able to recover oranges as well as part of the program if we were to expand to those school levels. Cold food. This is actually the largest category. Fruit juice. Those are all of our fruit juices that come in gable top cartons, or the frozen fruit juices in smaller sealed containers. Prepackaged and sealed fruit like applesauce would be a big one. Hummus cups, it's shelf-stable hummus in our district. Uncrustable sandwiches, and a big one for me, bags of the fresh fruit and vegetables. So the the apple slices, the carrots. We've had broccoli at my school. I think we had peas at Lincoln Heights. So we have green beans too. Green beans, a number of different vegetables that are in prepackaged bags. So you can see it's actually a decent amount of food, and it's all non-TCS food. So what is Towards Zero Waste able to offer during this potential pilot? We are able to provide all of the supplies to pilot schools. That's the rolling collection cart, the Clearview refrigerator, the rolling pantry cart, and all the signage, all of the program documentation, including our guidelines and the community flyer. And behind you, back there, we do have our examples that you can take a look at and ask questions about. We intend to facilitate surplus donation of foods. So helping to connect all of the pilot schools either with their own Backpack Buddies program, or a few of them have their own pantries or food banks. If they do not have those, then we are attempting to connect them with a local group so that if there is food remaining at the end of the week that cannot be given out to the school community, because that's our first focus, then from there we would like to try to donate it to at least keep it in the broader community. We also intend to help coordinate volunteers from our partner organizations to help pilot schools during the early weeks of the program rollout. And that would include data collection. So we have connections with groups like the League of Women Voters, the North Carolina Composting Council, the Capital Area Food Network, and a number of others where we would attempt to draw in our authorized registered Wake County volunteers to support our pilot schools. Measuring program success. We certainly wanted to try to include some aspect of data collection into this, obviously, to make a case for program effectiveness. And the way that we decided to tackle that would be actually to utilize our volunteers. So to not put data collection on any of our pilot schools that are already taking on additional roles. So we have created data collection forms that look at number of items that would be recovered, number of items that are accessed for consumption by students, number of items that are left over and need to be donated off-site or disposed of. We also hope to be able to collect feedback from the schools and volunteers regarding the program process and its impact. And we feel that combined, this data would shed light on the utilization and effectiveness of the program. With input from a variety of groups, we have already drafted a proposed list of pilot schools, and you can see the names up there. There are 8. And we do feel that it's a good representation across the district. So I included a map so you can see spread out quite a bit from Fuquay-Varina to Wake Forest, Raleigh, Cary. We have quite a bit of space covered. And then, of course, we are focused on the SHARE pilot program itself, but we wanted to include the concepts of what would opportunities for growth look like down the road, and that would include expansion of the program into additional schools within Wake County Public Schools, collaboration with other school districts looking to develop food recovery programs, and also advocacy on the state level for expanding the definition of recoverable items in North Carolina, which would help put us in line with what other states are doing across the country. So that's kind of our program in a nutshell. We are happy to answer questions.
Before we get to questions, can you talk about who you've been talking about for memorandum of
MOA. Thank you. So we have been working with Sharon Lynn over with Arrington Smith and on the memorandum of agreement between Wake County Public Schools and Toward Zero Waste. So having all of the agreed upon part components of the what a pilot would look like. And so that has been put together. Our board of directors at Toward Zero Waste has already signed and agreed to that. And so we are ready to take that to Wake County Public Schools for signature so we can move our pilot program forward.
So I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm also going to, if Mark, you guys have any questions, your team has any questions, please, now's the time. Dr. Amy,
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation, very thorough. And you and I both still working in the hospital setting, I see that waste, so often, even in our work setting, and one of the things that they will always talk about is the liability of eating food that's recovered, or that's why the hospitals don't do that. Are there any kind of concerns about liability, or how would you address that?
Yeah. So we, obviously, as a nonprofit, we do have insurance coverage, and we have made sure that it meets the requirements for the school district in terms of our insurance aspects. And we certainly are aware that any concerns would come to us in that regard. We did do, with the recommendation of the Wake County Health Department, we actually did a 4-year look back into any complaints related to CNS in the cafeterias for Wake County Public Schools. Only 11 items came back, and none of them had to do with the actual food, and certainly not the prepackaged food. So we are only talking about unopened, prepackaged foods, as well as the fruits with non-edible peels. So none of the edible components have come into contact with any of the students handling them.
And by the way, I want to invite Ms. Lynn, if anytime you have anything to add to this, please, if you want to come up to the table, you're welcome to. If you just want to stay there, that's fine too. But if you have anything to add, we'd love to hear from you as well.
I'm happy to answer any questions that Megan might not be able to address, but I've been working with Toward Zero Waste on the memorandum of agreement. I think it's close to being final, or they have signed it, and I feel fairly comfortable moving forward, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have.
On slide 12, where you list the community partners like the League of Women Voters, I understand this is not an exhaustive list, but if this is going to happen, I'd want you to be sure to get connected to our pool of volunteer organizations, like the Divine Nine came and spoke to us. There's a bunch, and we have that map now, so please be sure to connect with the community engagement team to get more volunteers that can be added to this list.
And what would be the best way to get in contact with them? Is that this?
Also, Mrs. is over here.
Nice to meet you.
Stick resource.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. Yes.
Dolphin.
I just have questions. You mentioned something about stuff that was donated off-site. Where does it get donated to?
So we don't, since of course we've not done this yet in Wake County, we have no concept right now of how much food we would have left over at an individual pilot school at the end of the instructional week. But let's say they have 12 extra breakfast muffins at the end of the week, and since those are case stated, the guidance we are giving our program is that those items have to be either donated to their students or donated off-site or disposed of at the end of the week, so they start fresh the next week. And so with that, if there are foods to be donated, then we're hoping to connect with the Backpack Buddies program internally within the school, or we actually have one school that has a food pantry in the school that we would be able to give extra food to them for their disbursement. After that, we're kind of working on connecting schools with an outside food pantry so that they could donate those foods and not have to dispose of them.
Okay. I was just curious if it had anything. I know that we have, like homeless and stuff like that, where we do have children, and I just was wondering if it would reach out to that. And I know that you listed some of your volunteers. Are you including parents in that, or is it just people? Yes.
So we have contacted and made overtures to connect with every PTA on our pilot school list, and so we actually have our 8th meeting on Thursday of this week with one of our last schools. So we know that PTAs are a huge component of our schools and their success, and certainly any new initiatives in them. So our first goal with reaching out to the PTAs at the pilot schools is just to educate them and to let them know what our goals are and what we're trying to accomplish. And then after that, it is letting them know if you have volunteers that are interested in coming in to support your own school, by all means, we want to partner together on that. And so we're giving them the first opportunity to sign up for future volunteer slots.
Okay, awesome. And then the next is thank you, because I think it's awesome. It's not just a matter of, can you provide more, but sometimes when you're looking at where we're wasting, we're able to put those resources somewhere else where somebody might not have seen it. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you.
I'm going to keep going around, but before, can you just touch on how you envision it rolling out, kind of to the point of talking to PTAs? Are you doing it all in one day? Are you doing staggered?
Yeah, great question. So what we kind of have come up with is a staggered approach. Let's say we do have our 8 pilot schools. Instead of starting all on one day, I personally want to be at all of those schools, and so that would be really hard for me to be at 8 schools at once. So I think we are looking at probably doing the 8 schools over, let's say, 16 instructional days. So one a day off, the second one a day off, and kind of going from there. That way, Alyssa and I can actually be very hands-on the first day or 2, if needed, at the school with the volunteer on site, with the staff, kind of acclimating them to the materials, helping them get them in place and signage up, all of that. So we look to have a staggered approach. One piece that, one question I do have on the table that I'll go ahead and throw out is, of course, we are a nonprofit. We do not have office space. So we are looking to figure out the best coordination for the delivery of our materials. 2 of the carts have to be put together, and that sort of thing. So we are looking for a recommendation or thoughts on a space that we could use for a week or 2 to deliver items and then put together carts and get them to the schools. Otherwise, it will be my garage, and that's okay, but that would be the plan. So we're working on that piece. Does that answer the rollout question?
Yeah. Ms. Rice, do you have?
Yes, just in case maybe I missed it, have we shared what the 8 pilot schools are going to be?
Have we shared with them or with you?
With us?
Yeah, it was in the list.
Okay.
Go back, I think 2
I thought I
slides.
just-
There it was, sorry.
There you go. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I did miss it.
No, that's okay.
Dr. Taylor, did you have something?
I was just going to say we would be able to work with them in terms of space. We'll have to check liability issues and make sure that's not an issue. But after we cross those T's and dot those I's, I think we should be able to accommodate.
Wonderful. And we do have representatives from Lincoln Heights Elementary and Wiley here with us.
Chair Harry.
Well, if everyone is all saying wonderful, glowing things, you hate to be the one to ask other questions, but for our due diligence, I think, we have to try to troubleshoot. I really want to see us develop a food waste recovery program, and I think this is really innovative, and I love that you have some working models. I'm just trying to nail down a few things. I know that sometimes when people get a program, they get excited about it and they talk about it. Like the representations you make might be different than representations that like supporters make. And so like I had heard that this would all be administered by volunteers and would not involve staff. Now, Mr. Hershey made a very important distinction. There would not be CNS staff. But I want to go back to, like, we have 4 positions then: a program admin, the share cart supervisor, the share cart stockers, and the share cart cleaners. And it's not necessarily fair to y'all, but for the board members that were here just earlier today, we talked about needing more adults in the building for front office support and more adults in the building for supervision, like during classes. And, typically a lot of these duties then fall on our teachers. And even though we've done a great job of closing those teacher vacancies, we're still not fully stocked and staffed. So I'd like us, as we go forward with it, to just really develop some more controls to make sure that we don't get like this wonderful burst of enthusiasm for the first couple of weeks, and then it just all falls back on our teachers. Because as wonderful and noble as a program it is, we have, like our wonderful teachers here today, we have teachers that would do it as volunteers and would be tremendous advocates. But I want to make sure that it doesn't fall on a teacher to do it when they have other student duties that they would need to. And I think, things that we can do to support volunteers and others, if you can provide training, or that's something that you can do on the nonprofit side to kind of take that, to make it easier for others to come in, parents, PTA members, and do it. That'll really help us from seeing this backslide onto teachers. And that's really my big concern.
You sold it like you were gonna just.
I wanted to make you earn
It
it.
made me sweat for that.
I wanted to make you earn it. The data.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
The data collection too. I'd like to get a little more information, because if this is something that people can contribute food to it at any time during any meal period, and they can take from it any time during any meal period or after school, how much time do you see volunteers being there and like really being able to accurately track what comes in and what comes out?
Great questions. And may I go back to your first
Yes,
point?
please.
So duly noted, and certainly this is a pilot, right? So we want to see, is this manageable for our schools? And then if so, which we hope it is and we believe it is, can we scale it? The schools that we have spoken with, the 8 schools, administration and/or their magnet coordinators have all heard the information. And they have all said, we can do this. We want to do this. So they already are aware of what may be asked of them. And they know that we are planning to provide volunteers to support initially. And of course, some of that will depend on how long we're able to continue to coordinate those volunteers for our schools. But many of our schools have said, this is our magnet theme. This is exactly up our alley in particular. So some of the schools already have staff that are interested and have been asking for this. A lot of these schools have been doing minor versions of sharing tables in their own way. It's been happening. IAs will redistribute bananas. I've been at my own school and seen that done. I've been there and done that. So some of this is happening, and we are formalizing it, and we are putting some procedures and guidelines behind it, and we're excited to do that, to be able to bring it to more schools and have some consistency there. Also, there are one of the roles in particular, my school, my children go to Poe, I have suggested to our administration that, to me, a perfect PTA position is that share cleaner. coming in on a Friday afternoon or Thursday before the holiday break and doing the cleaning and going through the items. I don't envision that taking more than 5 to 15 minutes. So none of these are very labor intensive. And for the roles in the cafeteria, the share supervisor, that person could be the IA that's already there monitoring the cafeteria. You know, all of our schools have IAs that are in the cafeteria, normally multiple. And so this is just one extension of that. And so it doesn't have to be a new role. It can be. Our schools that are composting have done various things. Some of them have new staff in the cafeteria helping with that. Others, they've added it as part of the job description for an existing position. And then, I'm sorry, about the data collection.
Yeah.
In your packet of materials, I do have links to our daily and weekly tracking forms that are intended for the volunteers only while they are there helping to do some quick tallying. We know it's not going to be perfect data collection, but it's intended to give us an idea of where we're headed. And so we put together 2 pretty easy to navigate forms for that purpose.
Thank you. I mean, the only thing, last thing is that I would like to see as we develop with the memorandum of understanding that we have some mechanism in place so that if, say, at one of the pilots, something's just not working out, that we can pivot out of that. And then if you have other schools that maybe are on a waiting list or applying, you might be able to relaunch it at a different school, but you don't lock a school into a commitment if they can't meet it.
Does the memorandum lock a school in any way? Is that
Or do they, can
broadly
they just
for-
terminate it?
Or is that broadly for the county?
30-day, anybody can get out. We can get out.
There is a termination for convenience provision in the memorandum.
I don't mean between us and them. I mean, I think
For each
the charities
school.
is an individual school. So does an individual school sign that? Or is that just like Mark Strickland signs it or Dr. Taylor signs it?
So the MOU would be signed by Mark, and I believe for each individual school
There's a registration form.
form.
And
Because this is a pilot program, and I don't know in the end how many schools will sign on at the end of this term, I had not included any individual schools into the memorandum of agreement, but we can certainly look into language that would include.
Because, and there's pros and cons in either approach, but like what I wouldn't want to see is, let's say a school had a problem, I wouldn't want to end the whole program for all 8 schools.
Right.
Right.
But at the same time, I wouldn't want a school to have to continue, like if they didn't have the volunteers.
Right.
Or there was some problem with equipment, or just
100%
whatever
agree.
could happen. So that's why having some sort of ability to have an individual school escape, and then if there's other potential schools that want in, to be able to replace them. That's my suggestion.
Ms. Edmonds and Ms. Rice.
Yeah, so with the IAs, I don't want to assume that they would think this is as easy breezy as is being presented here. I think, there is a Wake County Instructional Assistant Council, I guess is the right way. The state level, the North Carolina Teaching Assistants used to be a thing. They dissolved, but Wake County still has that.
That's right.
Group. And so there is a contact there. I think I would hope the priority would be with using the many volunteer partner organizations that we gave you today, that we could just really push it in that direction rather than put it on, because I would want to hear from IAs that actually do lunch duty of what their thoughts are about adding this to their plate, and not assume that they'd be like, oh, sure, no sweat, we can do this too. Like, I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, and certainly that's not what, definitely we didn't intend that to be the case. And I know that, it could be IAs, other at our school, it's elective special staff that also oversee lunch. And so I think it's going to be a combination, and that's why, again, we wanted to have the volunteers in initially to work during the implementation to see how things are running, to see how we're able to hand those pieces over. I think for the long-term nature of this type of program, the schools are going to need to take ownership of the program so that it is scalable across the districts, and that's what we see in other school districts in the country. But certainly there is a role for volunteers to play, especially initially. And then from there, I think we'll have to see what the program's showing us.
Ms. Rice?
One is clarity. The flyer that I handed was for your organization to be added onto our internal organizations that staff members can access. So just for clarification with that.
Okay.
Two, if you're looking for volunteers, I would suggest connecting with Activate Good, who
We chose not to do that yet, to be totally honest. We want a little bit more control of who's going into the schools, so I want the parents to have the first option, parents who have kids in those schools, and then I want it to be organizations that Towards Zero Waste has really worked with, that I know these people. I'm not ready to have people represent Towards Zero Waste going in there that I have not vetted.
Okay, so while I can appreciate what you've said, two key things that I've heard you all say at this table is the initial, right, the initial launching. So if you're talking about the initial part of where you're coming in and setting this up, basically is what the framework of what we're looking at. You're looking at long-term support. We're looking at who's going to purchase refrigerators and make sure that they are there and working, and if they break down, what do we do around those particular areas? And so we're looking at long-term. While I can definitely understand about wanting to make sure that you're keeping the fidelity of a model and that you're being sincere in how and who you would like to represent your programming. Wake County has also done its due diligence and job of vetting certain organizations that we partner with that are already in our schools, that are aware about our, as well,
Like a background.
background. Thank you. That's you. Chris is always my interpreter. He knew what I was saying. Our background checks and things of that nature. And so, because if we were to say what you're looking at and then what we see as a representation right now, that representation may not be as welcoming to some of the students within some of our schools if we were to just look at what we're seeing now as representation of what it may look like across our district within our schools. And so we as well, I would think, I can't speak for all board members, but that statement of we need to control who is representing what, we also have to do that same thing across the board within Wake County. We are responsible for all 9 districts and a representation so that we make sure that all students and staff and people are treated fairly and are open and not targeted and not all those things that we put a lot of time and effort in to make sure that every program we bring within Wake County is reputable. Every program that we bring in Wake County is of excellence and of a high standard. And so I really would like for you all to rethink that process and that model and that place of action. And until we can kind of get those types of thought processes together, it would be a little bit difficult for me to support certain things in certain areas until we could clarify.
I guess my
more
point
land.
was for the pilot. The pilot is where I am thinking right now. And so, yeah, long-term, after we get this going, Activate Good, I've worked with them. I think it's a great organization, but just Megan and I have talked about that these 8 schools, we're going to be hands-on. The 3 of us are going to be hands-on working with all these people, and just for this pilot, as I'm thinking about that.
I get it. Again, I respect
And the funding
that.
also is private funding that we have gotten.
And Chair, I'm going to close out. I respect that. Activate Good is just one of many suggestions, as Ms. Edmonds referred to, and I think I shared with you all prior to, because you didn't know who Divine Nine was, which is a very prestigious organizations across the country that do a lot of this type of work, who are very prideful people of excellence and of great standards. And so I think that it's very important that you all do a little bit more due diligence of looking at other organizations and programs that will bring the same level of prestige to any program if we so choose to bring within Wake County Public Schools. That's all I have, Chair.
And I've emailed the National Panhandle Council, the chapter for Raleigh, I believe, and I emailed twice. I haven't heard back, so if you have a better contact, I'm happy to get in that way. We certainly wanted to get out to them and
Our
bring on
superintendent
the-
probably really help you with that, really great.
You know how we've sent so many emails, but yes, we would love to have that personal connection and get in with them, absolutely. And so we are trying to amass a list of interested volunteers so that we can have a core cadre of people that are ready and willing and have passed all the background checks and get in there and help out.
Thank you, ladies, appreciate it.
Mr. Strickland.
I did not think to ask this question in all the discussions that we've had, and no one has asked it today, but how were the 8 schools selected? What was the criteria used to select them?
It was a combination of us having some key contacts in schools based on environmental connections already. We also talked to Paula DeLuca before she retired and got some suggestions. We worked with Wake County Environmental Services on and knowing what schools are proficient in doing well with the recycling, Feed the Bin program, as well as then we, of course, have a lot of contacts at our schools that are composting. So it was a combination of us thinking through which schools might have support from the admin down, as well as PTA. And then we actually had some word of mouth schools that had heard some rumblings and conversations and actually contacted us. So it was a combination.
So, hang on. So I want to just go back to one thing, and I think this is where there was a little conflict. So thinking about what Ms. Rice was talking about and having more volunteers, and this may go to some of the memorandum of understanding and the liability concern. So let's say it's successful and we are looking for more volunteers. How do they get the training from you? Because there could be a bunch of people already wanting to go in and saying like, hey, and we don't want to turn them away because we don't want it to fall off. Even if the 3 of you are hands-on, it's still 8 schools. And so how does someone say, you know what, I would love to do this, I'm there at lunches, let me get started right away. So there's the understanding of you all may be liable for something, so you want to train everybody, but then we also don't want to turn people away from that volunteering, and we have a diverse group of volunteers. So how can we work on that, or what's that?
So what we've created so far, and obviously this is just internal at this point, but it is in your list of documents as well. There's a volunteer section on that primary sheet with links to a volunteer interest form. So we have created a Google volunteer interest form, and that literally is for people to say, I've heard about this, I'm interested in potentially volunteering in a school. So that gives us some names and contact information. And then theoretically, those people, that list of interested volunteers, would receive by email our volunteer instructions, which includes information about the roles in the school during the meals on a Friday, what have you. And obviously all of this involves making sure that they have registered and done the appropriate background checks with Wake County. And that's an initial caveat in the volunteer interest form sign up. So from there, our plan is to have a sign up for each individual pilot school, so that we have, just like our PTAs utilize Sign Up Genius very frequently, but having a sign up for each school, for each day, for the one volunteer spot, for the breakfast, for the lunch, for the cleanup, so that volunteers that have received the information would have the link and would be able to go and sign up. And so we would have a list and know what volunteers were signed up for that school for that day.
Chris, Charity.
I was just, to Mr. Strickland's point, I was going to say, if, all of the schools were magnet schools. And so to that end, most of them should have a higher, like socioeconomic need where there might be more students that could take advantage of the food. But as magnet schools, they may have access to some more resources that might be able to help underwrite the program a little better than some other schools. Just an observation.
There's only one school that was not a magnet, was Davis Drive Elementary, and they have very strong environmental programs, including composting already as well.
Oh, that was Davis Drive, not Dillard Drive, I'm sorry.
But they're both on there.
Yeah.
Davis and Dillard are both on there.
So what's the next step after this? Is it turning to staff and saying, hey, this is on, the board feels good about it, and then Dr. Taylor, it's in your hands?
So I'll share this. I wanted everybody to get their comments out. The first thing I'll share is that all of the concerns that the board members have had, I've had, all the things that you see in terms of the good parts of this program, we've all seen that. Before we even let this move forward, my first responsibility was to make sure that I clearly understood what the potential impact could be on our child nutrition program, because we're talking a $70-some million program, probably in that range, I think. Dr. Harvey, who was then the state director, she and I talked, and she said, I don't want to do anything that gets out in front of the superintendent. So we had those conversations. I know she talked with you all. And so my goal is to make sure that we are very deliberate in terms of how we would expand this. This is why I support the pilot, because it will give us the feedback on all of those things that can potentially be the kinks if we decide to expand or how we decide to expand. And so I know that child nutrition staff have vetted this. They're comfortable with moving forward, but I can tell you that everything will be about how we look to make sure this is a program that we can expand. I can tell you that 8 pilots is great. It gives us a close look. We expand that out to schools beyond that, could potentially be 199 or 204 or 5 in the next year. That does create those gaps where things can go wrong. And so that's why we will look very close at this pilot to make sure we have all of those things that are necessary, knowing that pilot is one thing, but 40 or 50 or 60 schools can be different. So we're going to depend heavily on what we get out of this. I think the biggest concern is how something could potentially shift to staff if the volunteer numbers go down. I know with these schools, when they have programs that align to this work, I think it becomes very easy and it aligns well. But when that's not the case, it can move back. And so I can tell you that I support it. I think it's a great program, but all of the concerns, we look very closely at those. And so we do look at this as an opportunity to establish something that's going to be well and really give us the blueprint of how we expand it. But we're comfortable with moving forward, knowing that the examination piece is going to be very tight. $70 million program, I'm not going to do anything to put that in jeopardy. Absolutely.
I think I would, just as one board member, would say that as far as determining the length of a pilot program is up to staff and working with the nonprofit, and then, letting the facilities committee know or whatever. But I mean, certainly pilot for the rest of this calendar year, and then maybe even a couple of months into the next school year. But again, I think that's a staff-driven decision to really be able to. But I'd also then like to have you all back to say, here's how it's going, here's what we're seeing, including kind of from the staff perspective as well. So we have a good understanding. So to Ms. Edmonds' point, is that being addressed? And to Ms. Rice's point around volunteers, is that starting to be addressed? So I think, Dr. Ing?
And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but in terms of, the collecting data regarding the cost savings or potential, savings on food costs, and also the cost of scaling this to a system-wide. That's something that we need to have that information too.
Well, I would say the cost for scaling, I think, is entirely on the nonprofit. So.
Well, I mean, monetary cost, but also,
No, I was just going dollars there. Yeah. So then we have, and I'm going to put staff on the spot a little bit, is this, hey, we're going to review it and sign it you don't have to say when you're going to sign it, but I'm hearing approval. And then kind of just let us know hey, they're going to roll out on whatever day.
So what I would ask is that we go back and review those last logistical pieces in terms of the MOU to determine if there's something else we need to address and pay attention to. But at that point, everything I've heard from staff, they're comfortable with moving forward with the pilot. And at that point, sign off and be ready to go. We want to make sure we look at those last things that you talked about in terms of the MOU to make sure we're covered.
Yeah, sounds great. And I know you said 16 calendar days, but thinking about a week, it'd be like a Monday, Wednesday, because I don't know if you want to start one on Friday and then have the weekends.
Thank you. Any input's welcome.
So today is the 11th, and when do you think, because I have already had my board approve this.
So they'll get, I think they'll review and then, well, I assume in a couple of days.
Okay. Because you guys have everything. Thank you.
And Mr. Strickland, you're our contact?
Yes.
Generally moving forward? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Last item is new business. Mr. Strickland can come on back up when he's ready. Yeah. Oh, that's right, we have the tariffs first. Yeah, go ahead. And then new business. Are you guys doing?
Tariff
Yeah.
discussion.
All right, so I asked this to come to the table. We have no idea what the new administration is doing with tariffs. It's changing all the time. They just added like a 40% to steel and aluminum, I think.
25%.
25%? My bad. Still terrible for costs. And so I think what I'm really wanting to do is continue to educate the public on the impact of this and how we have no control over, like, we can't just say, oh, we're just going to go to this American company that makes everything, and kind of talk about the process for purchasing very quickly too, and how it's not easy for a school district to avoid these kind of costs. Are you guys waiting for him, or are you guys doing it?
Yeah, we're happy to discuss that.
Yeah,
As
go
far
ahead.
as the bid process goes, certainly we will design the project. Many of the projects have already been designed. Many of our projects currently are under construction. The projects that are going to be opening up this summer, really would expect very little impact on that. Hopefully those jobs have all been purchased, they've been bought out. Those jobs that are in design right now, what we often do as we go through the design phase is we look at what materials are costing, and we tailor the design to the more cost-effective materials, the more available materials. But the design effort takes at least a year. The review process takes a long time, maybe as long as a half year or even longer, depending on site complications and things like that. It could take a year. And so it's kind of hard to adjust and be nimble with the design when you're that far in the future. So we really probably won't have much opportunity to be changing a design as we go through. And these tariffs, as you said, it's a moving target. And what's been proposed and what's going to be finally implemented is a guess. But as far as the bid process goes itself, we certainly will be putting the packages out for bid. Contractors will be bidding it. They'll be looking at.
Can you use it? Can I make it a suggestion? Can you use this in terms of, like, we need to do a new HVAC system at a high school or elementary? How does that bidding
Yeah,
work?
if I can, because,
Yeah.
you all do a lot, right? And so for the board's purposes and planning, we're trying to get whatever handle we can on what these changes could mean. So there is, like, the long-term bids, when you have a design process and you have a new project and you're starting. But then also, we've seen the problems during the pandemic with supply chain issues. So these tariffs, in some way, they could lead to higher building costs for a lot of materials that we might see that could impact our cost projections, but they could also impact the availability of certain materials based on cost and scarcity. And I just didn't know, is that sort of the
Yeah,
direction you were
also.
looking at?
Also, but just kind of, so people understand, like, we might not be able to just turn around and buy an American-made, if it even exists, HVAC system because of some of the rules that we have to follow and what we're required by state.
Yeah, just certain materials
Right.
that might be needed in a certain product, or just, I know some like drywall materials, gypsum and others we import a lot of that from Canada. Is that?
Yeah.
Give a quick overview of what kind of our synopsis of the tariffs. We've got Mexico and Canada, they were going to impose a 25% across the board tariff, with the exception of energy from Canada. Trump administration has paused that for 30 days so they can do border negotiations, law enforcement, and also probably additional trade negotiations as we look down the window, out down the road. The other one is a 10% tariff across the board with China. That's been augmented by Monday's change of 25% for both aluminum and for steel to all countries, not just China, Mexico, and Canada. So that is a very big change from the 2018 stance that they had, where in 2018 we kind of saw the workaround of manufacturers domestically soliciting and getting other suppliers from other countries to get their steel. So that's going to be a change. Now there's a new one on the table as of Monday, is the reciprocal tariffs, which is where Trump is going to go dollar to dollar on certain goods from certain countries. Now, what does that mean? Is that going to be Europe with automobiles? How does he treat India? How does he treat our allies? And how does Congress and the Senate play in those negotiations? So, and then there's the economic impact as we're looking down the road. There's definitely going to be higher costs to the consumer because it's basically a tariff tax on us. There's going to be supply chain disruption potentially. We're also going to see, as we learned in 2018, there's probably going to be a loss of jobs. We saw about 250 to 300,000 jobs lost as a result of this. I mean, if you look back at the case history of 2018, it's not a good place. You're asking, why is he going to the table? Well, first of all, I think he's trying to get him to the table.
Yeah, okay, you don't even have to speculate on why he's doing it. I just really want to get people to understand the impact on us, on our bottom line, so on how many jobs, like, what is this going to do to a school system?
I think what we need, what our biggest focus, and we've contacted our contractors and consultants and project management, and they're saying it's too early to tell exactly what's going to happen. I think what we're going to really be concerned on is Canada. If we go full board, 25% on Canada, the steel, lumber, aluminum, that's where we go to for other supplies. I think we're going to see that's the biggest vulnerability we have, up to 25%. So looking at how long that takes in 2018, that was probably 6 to 9 months. It went to a maximum of 25%. So that's where we're kind of starting to put our focus on how far do we start trending and looking at it. What are we going to get impacted by? Definitely our structural steel. We're definitely going to have wall studs, which are metal, our MEP, our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. There's a whole diversity of metal. To what degree, that's to be determined. But we've already seen that in our MEP trades over the last 3 years. We've probably seen at least a 25% increase in trying to track that just on the trends. And we've constantly faced uncertainty. I mean, we had the port strikes recently, had droughts down the Panama Canal, new negotiations at Panama Canal. This is not something that's foreign. I don't think it's going to be the degree of COVID, but we definitely have got to keep our eye on this one because it could have an impact. Just for an example, Felton Grove High School, which is under construction, won't be impacted. Just using it as a magnitude of increases, say the structural steel for Felton Grove, the bid for both the labor and the material is at $12.6 million. So if we roughly say half of that is the material cost, and we put a 25% increase on it, that's $1.5 million increase to the project. That's a $199 million project, so that equates basically to 0.08%. So how does that handle in our contingency and reserves? Typically, we like to stay at 5% as a minimum for our reserves. We also have a program contingency of $10 million. So for Felton Grove, we have a contingency of 10 million, and we have a reserve for the entire program of 10. So if we see prolonged increases, yes, we could run into some challenges as far as the budget goes. I think it's going to be one of these, we're going to have to wait, watch, and then try to, based on the input from our contractors, seeing what they're getting. We've only had one contractor right off the get-go on Canada and Mexico's tariffs. They received a note from Ream hot water heaters to expect a 16.7% increase on their water heater charge. Well, that got rescinded the next day for a 30-day pause. So,
Right.
and where did they get 16.7% as their magic number? So,
Right, yeah. Ms. Edmonds, you had your hand up earlier.
I was just going to make the point that, if we, when you were talking about how if we suddenly decided, well, we've got to find our HVAC from an American-made system, for us not to fool ourselves and not think that the entire country and anybody in the U.S. looking for an HVAC system, we're going to be competing,
Right.
trying to, so just
I mean,
that it's widespread and.
Well, and I know that in the past, I'm going to go to Dr. in a second, you guys have talked about, hey, we need a part for our boiler. We're ordering it, and I assume that's not coming from here. So those are the things that maybe on small scales are impacted, and it just adds and adds and adds. So I'm really trying to emphasize to people like the real world impact, and if it costs another 1.5 million, that's 1.5 million less than we have to do other stuff when we have all of these projects we have to get done.
in regards to HVAC, COVID taught us a valuable lesson is when the supply chain got disrupted, the lead times increased on that. So up to 55 weeks on a chiller or an electrical switchgear.
Yeah.
So we've actually had to create an early package on these projects. So that's challenging when we're just establishing the budget, is to get that bond program to work with that early package, and that's something we focus on. So it's not holding up the project waiting on that or paying extra to get ahead in the line to meet that scheduled demand.
Dr.
Yeah, so, for good or bad, this is kind of the reality we're facing now. My one question is, at what point will we be informed, or I don't want to live in the minutia either, but at what point will we be informed as a board of any kind of increase in expenditures? Hopefully you would have found a way to modify your costs or modify the design in such a way that will hopefully decrease the need to ask for more or whatever. But I just want to know kind of at what point we will be needing to make any decisions.
Well, I think that was one of the points, is it's hard to change because they got to order stuff so far out. But go ahead, Dave.
Yes, and also to that question, we will, it depends on the budget. And it could be where, we're talking about HVAC systems, maybe specifically chillers, and if the price of chillers increases, and that's an item where we may be buying several chillers at the same time. Maybe we don't buy as many, maybe we have to buy one less. So that's always a possibility. Also going to mention that, so yes, we're facilities design and construction. We talk construction projects, but the school system, on the operating side will also be impacted. The purchasing department will be impacted. All those expenses, all those things, that's where you might see more of a direct increase.
That cost for, I know Ms. Caulfield has pointed out on the CIP, the cost of computers, right? And that's certainly going to be impacted right away.
Paper.
Potentially, yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I could,
Yes.
one of the things I'll share is that because this is so new, because we haven't fully determined what this will look like, and it is a moving target, then what we've got to do is really monitor in all areas, not just facilities, design and construction, but everywhere. And so I appreciate that request, and what we will do is make sure that we now have those processes in place where we can report out what changes that we see as they become available. And so I appreciate us having this conversation so that our public will know that we've developed a process of dealing with all of these in terms of how we construct buildings, how we acquire things. We do have the advent of the pandemic and what we saw there and those changes. This is something that's kind of like that, but not totally like that. And so once it kind of plays out, I believe that we will very quickly begin to see what those changes look like, what that could mean in terms of cost, what kinds of disruptions we may have in the supply chain. Those things still now are very unknown because this is so new. But I do think that the public needs to know that if this kind of disruption comes, it could completely change our CIP and what we plan out over the next several years. And I think we all have to be prepared for that. So that is the only thing I know that we can do is just to look very close and report out those changes as we see those, because it is really unknown.
Yeah.
Until we know what we're going to do, what foreign countries are going to do, what that looks like in the end, still going to be an unknown.
A good opportunity for us to assess things and look at the impact of major projects would be each time we get a phase submittal. So we get a schematic design development, and a construction document submittal. With those come cost estimates. So that would be a great opportunity, a great time for us to assess any major impacts. And then if there are things that are substantial, we could share them with you all at that time. And that's for the larger projects. Now, for all of the other smaller things that go on, life cycle, crimp and snap and those, we'll just have to see how they go. But I think Dave made a good point. This just isn't FD&C. This has the potential to impact many other aspects of our operation, purchasing being the main thing. And so that's something that we'll have to monitor as well.
And I'm really glad we're having this conversation, and we got budget season coming up, so just continue to highlight the real-world impacts of things that are outside of our control at this table.
And I mean, when we even think about school supplies and where that comes from, this could be wide-reaching. So we're just, I think that everybody needs to prepare for, bless you, what could be something that's very different. So,
Thank you very much for that. Just one thing on, well, I'll ask if anyone else has new business, but one thing for new business, I would like, as we do the 20-year facilities plan, is to develop some way that, or let the board know how we do outreach to different community groups, whether it's NCAE or any other organization, how we're getting feedback. I know, that was part of that meeting before, but just how you guys are getting feedback from, even if it's teachers or whomever as part of the planning. And the other thing would be maybe March or April, some small group meetings with board members to kind of give some updates as we're doing this and allow for them to have the opportunity to give some feedback, if that works. So, and then we at some point do a bigger presentation to the public, June, July, August, something like that. When we've got some meat on the bones. Anyone else? Anything good for the group? 4:56, and we started about 20 minutes late, so this is how we run the meeting. We're adjourned.